Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. Yesterday I was working in my garden, and there's an area in my garden where I'd planted a lot of beautiful flowers. I was really looking forward for those flowers, to watching them all flowering and reaching their full potential, how beautiful it was going to be. However, it hasn't turned out the way I expected because there's weeds there as well. Now, in Matthew chapter 13, Jesus told a parable about the wheat and the tares, that somebody was sowed wheat and was expecting a harvest of wheat, and yet the tares, the weeds, an enemy came and planted them in order to spoil the harvest. Now, I'm quite sure when it comes to my garden, it's not a case of an enemy having planted those weeds there. I don't think anybody's that really has got it in for me so much they'd sneak into my house and sow weeds in my garden at night. But nevertheless, the weeds have grown up, and they're spoiling what I had planned my garden would look like. Now, I was trying to pull the weeds out. The only problem was the weeds were so entwined with the flowers that when I was pulling the weeds out, I was ending up pulling up the flowers as well. And in the end, I just had to leave it there. It's not exactly how I wanted it to look, and I'm not overly happy with how it's all turned out. But you know what? It's better to leave it now and let it grow as it is and still enjoy the flowers in amongst all the weeds than just have everything pulled up altogether. When I look at the Church of Jesus Christ, I see something similar going on. In the Church of Jesus Christ, you get some of the most wonderful and beautiful examples of God's grace working in people's lives. You see people who you thought had potential for nothing, and they develop and they blossom and they grow through the power of the Holy Spirit. And then you see people being stupid. You see people, even in the church, being mean. And I do believe that we should do everything we can to promote righteousness in the church. But in the end, there's going to be stuff in the church that you don't like and I don't like. As a pastor, I've had people come to me and say, you know what, I don't like this in the church, I don't like that. And I've said, well, neither do I. And they said, but you're the pastor. I said, I know. And as a pastor, I love the church. And that's why I probably like what I'm seeing in that respect even less than you are. They say, well, why don't you do something about it? And the reason is because sometimes you can't always fix everything in the church. Sometimes you've got to allow God to work things out. Now, that's not an excuse to tolerate sin or false doctrine in the church or anything like that. But it does mean that you can't always fix everybody in the Church of Jesus Christ. At one time of my life, I saw it as somehow I had this appointed ministry to correct everybody else and put them right so they would see things the way I saw them and think about things the way I think about them. And I came to realize that that was not why God had put me here. God's put me here to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. God's put me here to lead people to know Jesus and enter into a relationship with him. God's put me there to encourage people and encourage them into something better. But in the end, not everybody's going to do that. In the end, some people are going to do things that I disagree with. They're going to do things differently from how I think they should be done. And I've got to keep loving those people. And you know what? God will sort it all out in the end. And I've got to trust him to do that. You see, in the end, the church it's not your church, it's not my church, it's God's church. And God is the one who will bring his purposes to pass through his church. I'm certainly grieved when I see things happening in the church that should not be there. I'm certainly grieved when I see bad attitudes and I see people saying and doing things that don't reflect the beauty and the glory of Jesus Christ in the church. But I can't always fix everything, and neither can you. So let's love people. Let's encourage them into a better place. But in the end, let's trust God, because Jesus said, I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I need to trust his word in that, as do you. God bless you today, and join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.